Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and today I'm going to talk to you about a survey survey conducted by Pew across 24 countries in the West, mostly in the West, and they have concluded that, or they have found that a majority of people in nearly 20 of the 24 countries have very negative views of the Jewish state. That means in 20 out of 24 countries, more than 50% of the population who answered the survey has a negative view of the Jewish state of Israel. And I will show you that survey, and I have some observations and comments to make. But mostly, what I'm trying to do is I'm looking at two surveys, one conducted about the so-called global surveys, which is actually only sample of 24 countries. And they also did another survey where they asked some questions in Israel and they asked some questions in the United States. So I'm cobbling together the questions and answers from these surveys for this particular conversations. So hang in there. But before we look at the data, please, if you have not already subscribed to Conversations, subscribe to the channel, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share this video with your socio-political network. For those of you who would like to support Conversations, do join the channel and become a member. One of the perks of being a member is we regularly have Zoom conferences in which you get to give me direct feedback, ask me questions. We discuss geopolitical issues. Sometimes many of you are students who seek advice on graduate studies and furthering their careers, etc. So those Zoom conferences are quite useful, even for me, because I get some very handy and useful feedback. So this is the first slide that I want to share, which is the most critical of all of them. This is what it shows, that in most countries, surveyed nations, a majority of people have negative views of Israel. So look at the divisions. So it's divided into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sort of regions. The topmost region is North America, then Europe. So there are two countries from North America which were surveyed: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 countries from Europe. So you can see this is a heavy Western bias. And then you have 5 countries from Asia, and then Turkey, which it has its own category, I guess, Eurasia. And then you have 3 from Africa and 3 from South America. Actually, Mexico should be in North America, but anyway, so maybe they think of it as Latin America. So this is what the survey says. And if you notice, for most of these countries, in Canada, for example, 60% of the population has unfavorable rating towards Israel. Only one third, 33%, have favorable ratings. The ratings are divided into 4 categories: very unfavorable, that's extremely dark blue; somewhat unfavorable, which is light blue; and the light green is somewhat favorable, and dark green is very favorable. So you can, just by looking at the slide, you can see right away that the densest part is the blue. So the blue is much, much more bigger in size than the green. That tells you that in this particular region, most of the countries have negative views of Israel. And then you see how dark the dark blue is. And it just jumps out at you to say, so not only do they not have favorable ratings towards Israel, some of those unfavorable ratings are quite unfavorable. Even the United States, which is clearly the most strongest of Israeli supporters, to the extent that it appears that the United States has no independent thought other than Israel's foreign policy. So even yesterday, the US voted alone and vetoed a Security Council resolution which was trying to end starvation in Gaza. So the US will not even vote against Israel, even to prevent starvation in Gaza. So you can understand how captured US foreign policy towards the Middle East is. Even then, you can see that 53% of Americans have an unfavorable ratings or view of Israel, and only 45% has. The US is probably the in terms of countries, people who like Israel, it is third, surprisingly, after African countries like Nigeria and Kenya. The US is third with 45. But in Europe, you can clearly see that two-thirds to three-fourths, that means two-thirds is roughly around 60, 66% to about 75%. People have very negative views of Israel. So you can see in the all countries, there is no single country in North America or Europe, which is the traditional West. Is there any country which has even half of the population in having positive views of Israel? So this is a remarkable shift in policy, in public opinion, and this is going to have a long-term impact, not just on Israel's aid and weapons that it has been getting, non-stop supply of weapons from these countries, especially Canada, US, Germany, Britain. And all of that will soon probably end if this trend continues. And if the US is not going to restrain Israel, then it will continue to commit crimes against humanity, and the blue will get bluer and bluer. If you look at Asia, except India. I mean, India is completely out of sync with the rest of the world. It is out of sync with the West, and it is out of sync with Asia. Of the five countries from Asia, all of them have disapproval ratings or unfavorability ratings which are above 60. 60 for South Korea, 74 for Australia. This is the Quad partner. 79 for Japan, which is also a Quad member with India, and 80% Indonesia. So India is completely out of it. And this is quite a hilarious. This is not a measure of Indian view of Israel. I think this is a measure of Islamophobia that dominates India. Uh, and then you look at approval ratings are not very strong. So there's a lot of Indians who apparently don't have an opinion on this issue. Of course, Turkey is the one which has the most negative view, but there are still 4% people who seem to have somewhat favorable view of Israel. It appears as if there are 3% with somewhat favorable and 1% with very favorable view. If you look at uh, the Latin American segment, Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina, remember that Mexico and Argentina do have a significant Jewish population in that country, and yet you see that, except for Argentina, where a plurality of people have unfavorable views. In Brazil and Mexico, you can see 58 and 61% having unfavorable view of Israel. So this is across the board. I guess American politicians will see this and accuse the world of being anti-Semitic. Anybody who's critical of Israel these days is simply accused of being anti-Semitic. So the whole world is apparently now anti-Semitic, I guess. One comment I do want to make about India is that we often see very supportive views of India uh, from India towards Israel. What I would love to see is a survey of Israelis and what they think about India. Uh, but what is interesting is if you look at the Converse, the Pew Research Center in February and March also asked Israelis what they think of their country. And it was very interesting that in 2024 and 2025 both, 58% of Israelis thought that the country was not respected around the world. And the only difference is that the intensity of their perception of unfavorability, it increased. So in 2024, 58% thought that Israel was not respected around the world. Of that 58, 15% thought that it was really not respected. Now, a quarter of Israelis, one out of four Israelis thinks that Israel is not respected at all in the world. They're quite optimistic, actually, I should say. After looking at this data, that should be much higher. And of course, in terms of respectability, there are still about 40% Israelis who think that their country is respected abroad. Uh, an interesting survey question was about negative views, about the changes in negative views in the US about Israel. And then if you can look at the data here in 2022, only 42% of Americans had unfavorable views of Israel, and now uh, it's 53% of Americans who don't have a favorable view of Israel. So I guess America has become more anti-Semitic than it was before, or basically Americans have awakened to the atrocities that Israel has committed in Gaza after Hamas attacked and killed 1,200 people on October 7. And since then, Israel has completely devastated and destroyed Gaza, has killed close to 60,000 people, a vast majority of them women and children. Israel probably has killed more children in the last 2 years than Hamas has killed Israelis in the last since its existence till now. Not only that, Israel is using all kinds of horrible tactics such as starvation, etc., to collectively punish all the Palestinians, at least the Gazans, to drive them away from their homes, and is in the process of either committing a genocide or an ethnic cleansing in Gaza. And so it is good to see that all that overwhelming evidence that is available has moved at least 11% of Americans who are not swayed away by the extremely biased coverage that we see in the US media. And of course, the brain dead, moral dead comments by American politicians from both sides of the aisle. Of course, you can see that the Democrats have moved significantly to the extent of 70%. I think that 30% is probably Joe Biden alone who is supporting Israel, but the public opinion of unfavorability has moved from 53 to 69. Among Democrats, among young Democrats, has gone up to 71%. And of course, the Republicans, who are quite morally challenged on many other issues, not just this. It's still among young Republicans, it has moved to 50%. Uh, I want to show you something about the domestic religious differences. So if you look at US religious groups' support for Israel currently, I want to tell you a little bit about this survey. Like I said, this survey pretends to get global opinion, but it is clearly one thing that is missing in this survey is the Muslim countries, only Indonesia, Muslim majority countries, only Indonesia and Turkey are part of this survey, and I think also Nigeria. Uh, but otherwise, can you imagine what this survey would look like if it was truly global and included all the 57 OIC countries in this, Russia, uh, China is also not part of this survey. So you can imagine they just left out billions of people. But nevertheless, still, it's very damning with what we found. In the United States, uh, so in this, blue is unfavorable, green is favorable. So 57% Protestants have favorable views towards Israel at the moment, and you can continue to see it goes on even, and then it starts dropping. Those who are non-evangelicals, suddenly you can see that the favorable unfavorability rating rises or negative views increase. Catholics are again 53% negative. Of course, American Jews have very positive views, 73%. I guess roughly 3 out of 4 American Jews have favorable views of Israel, and a little more than 1 out of 4 have unfavorable views of Israel. Among Muslims, it's quite surprising that 19% Muslims have favorable view of Israel and 81% have negative views. I mean, that is the constituency which has the highest negative views, then followed by those who are not religiously affiliated, which is has about 69%. So this is an interesting survey. What I'm surprised is how how strong the favorability Israel enjoys among evangelicals and Christians, even though more than half the country has unfavorable view towards Israel. And how many Muslims, 1 out of 5, seems to have favorable views of Israel. That does come as a surprise. Uh, there's another interesting question that was asked of the Israelis about which countries they find helpful and which countries do they find unhelpful. So 80%, if Israelis find the US very helpful naturally, with people like Joe Biden, who is known also as Genocide Joe, having what we call as ironclad support, and then Donald Trump, who will let Netanyahu do whatever he wants. So obviously, Israelis find 80% of them find America uh, helpful. It would be interesting to have a much more in-depth discussions with those Israelis, 15% of them who think that US is not helpful, it is harmful. It is quite possible there could be a sampling of Arab Israelis, the Muslim Israelis, who are about 20% of the country's population. And then if you look across the board, Egypt is roughly the same, 41, 44%. Saudi Arabia also is considered more harmful than useful, but Egypt is more useful than harmful. And then Qatar is also at least 30%, close to 30%, 29% Israelis see Qatar as very helpful, which is quite interesting. And China, 50, more than 50%, I guess, have no opinion, but 40% find it's harmful, and nine. And of course, they find Iran the most harmful country, which is understandable given Iran's support for Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah. Americans offer mixed assessment of Trump's handling of relations with Israelis. So they were asked a question about what they thought of Trump's handling of this situation. So among the adults, 31% thinks he's favoring Israel too much, and about roughly 60% think that he is pro-Israel. Only 3% Americans think that he is pro-Palestine. I wonder what they are smoking. And then there are 37% who are obviously ignorant and are honest enough to not form an opinion without being well informed. But clearly, Republicans are not very happy. Only 13% of them think that he's supporting Israel too much. But clearly, 64% of them think that he is supporting Israel, and only 3% think that he is supporting Palestinians. Democrats, well, half of them think he's supporting Israel too much, but so did their former president, their own candidate. Genocide Joe was also supporting Israel with ironclad commitment, sending billions of dollars, unending supply of weapons to war. After seeing for nearly 14 months what Israel did in Gaza, there was no flinching on the part of Biden. So I don't understand what's the point of Democrats having any opinion at all if their party is not representative, if their leaders don't, the policies of their leaders don't reflect the preferences of the party members, then what's the point? Anyway, even they, only four of them actually think, 4% of them think that he's supporting the Palestinians too much, which I find quite surprising for the Democrats to have that view. So this is a survey conducted by Pew. I would have liked to see more countries sampled, but because of the infrastructure that Pew has established in these countries, so they keep interviewing only these countries. In a way, it helps if you are interested only in the view of these countries, but clearly most of the global south is excluded. There are only about 6 countries or 7 countries from the global south which are part of this survey. And so it is heavily biased towards the West and the North. So keep that in your mind. So thank you for watching Khanversations. Please like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share it with your social political network. Until next time, I'm your host, Muqtedar Khan. Take care.